My name is Kayla, 32 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought family meant unconditional love. Then came that phone call from Mom asking me to skip Thanksgiving this year because they needed space. The pain cut deep, but I simply replied, "Have a lovely, quiet Thanksgiving." What they never expected was my plan B involving my Vermont farmhouse, 20 relatives, and a feast they would only see online. Before I share how I turned rejection into my greatest opportunity, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever turned heartbreak into triumph. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, family meant everything to me. Our house was always the gathering place, the heart of every celebration, especially Thanksgiving. Mom Sandra was the queen of hosting, transforming our modest home into a magical space where relatives from both sides of the family would gather, laugh, and create memories. Dad Frank was her perfect partner, grilling the perfect turkey, telling his famous dad jokes, and making everyone feel special. As a child, I watched and learned, soaking up their hospitality skills like a sponge. My siblings and I were close too, at least I thought we were. Brian, my older brother, by 3 years, always the achiever, following in Dad's footsteps with his accounting career, married his college sweetheart Amber, and gave my parents their first grandchildren, twins, Noah and Emma, now 6 years old. Madison, my younger sister, by 4 years. The family beauty and social butterfly, recently engaged to Tyler, her boyfriend of 2 years. Then there was me, the middle child, the creative one. I never quite fit the mold my parents seemed to have designed. While they valued stability and tradition, I craved adventure and self-expression. After college, I moved to New York City to pursue my dream of becoming an interior designer. For 8 years, I built a successful career there, working with high-profile clients and even starting my own small design firm. Everything changed 2 years ago when James, my fiancé of 3 years, died in a car accident. The world I had carefully constructed shattered overnight. The city that once energized me now felt suffocating. Every corner held memories that cut like glass. After months of barely functioning, I made a decision that shocked everyone, especially my family. "You are running away from reality," Mom said when I told her I was selling my apartment and buying a farmhouse in rural Vermont. "This is just grief talking, Kayla. You will regret leaving your business, your friends, everything you have built." Dad was more practical but equally concerned. "How will you make a living up there in the middle of nowhere? Who buys interior design services in farm country?" What they failed to understand was that I was not running away. I was running toward healing. The 100-year-old farmhouse I purchased needed extensive renovation, which gave me a project to pour my heart and skills into. The 10 acres of land offered room to breathe, to scream, to cry without judgment. The small community nearby provided connection without the overwhelming pressure of the city. Despite their reservations, I moved to Vermont. I spent that first year restoring the farmhouse, learning to garden, and slowly rebuilding my design business remotely. Many of my New York clients stayed loyal, and word of mouth in Vermont brought new opportunities. I discovered a niche market renovating historic homes in the area, combining modern comforts with authentic, rustic charm. Throughout this transition, I maintained our family traditions. Every Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, I made the 4-hour drive back to Connecticut. Even last Thanksgiving, just months after moving, I made the journey through an early snowstorm to be with them. Mom cried when she saw me, hugging me tight, whispering how much she missed me. Dad helped carry my bags, asking detailed questions about the farmhouse renovation, showing genuine interest for the first time. That visit gave me hope that they were finally accepting my choice, which is why I tried something bold last Christmas. I invited the entire family to celebrate at my farmhouse. "Let me host this year," I suggested. "The renovation is complete. There is plenty of room for everyone, and the Vermont snow makes everything magical." Their response was swift and unanimous. "We always celebrate Christmas here," Mom insisted. "It would not feel like Christmas anywhere else." Brian backed her up. "The kids expect Christmas at Grandma and Grandpa's. We cannot disappoint them." Madison did not even try to be subtle. "Vermont in December, way too cold. Plus, Tyler and I already have plans with friends in the city after family dinner." Only my cousin Lily and her husband showed interest, but ultimately declined when they realized no one else was coming. "Maybe next year," she said apologetically. I swallowed my disappointment and drove to Connecticut as usual. The holiday was pleasant enough, but something had shifted. For the first time, I felt like a visitor rather than a daughter coming home. The conversations flowed around me rather than with me. Questions about my life in Vermont were cursory, quickly redirected to Madison's wedding plans or the twins' school achievements. Still, family is family. I maintained our weekly phone calls. I sent thoughtful gifts for birthdays and anniversaries. I followed their lives on social media, commenting supportively on every post. When Dad had a minor surgery in March, I drove down and stayed for a week to help out. When Madison needed assistance picking her wedding colors, I created mood boards and fabric swatches. When Mom mentioned wanting to redecorate their living room, I offered my professional services for free. Throughout it all, I cherished memories of Thanksgivings past. The year Dad burned the turkey and we ordered pizza laughing until our sides hurt. The time Grandma Josephine brought her famous sweet potato casserole forgetting she had accidentally used salt instead of sugar, and we all pretended it was delicious. The tradition of going around the table to share what we were thankful for, often resulting in unexpected tears and heartfelt declarations of love. These memories sustained me through lonely nights in my farmhouse. They reassured me that despite the distance, despite their misgivings about my choices, we were still a family bound by love and history. Or so I thought until that phone call 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just finished with a client consultation over video call discussing renovation plans for their 19th century Vermont schoolhouse. Outside my window, the autumn leaves were performing their final dance before winter would claim the landscape. I was thinking about dinner when my phone rang, displaying Mom's name on the screen. "Hi, Mom," I answered cheerfully, putting the call on speaker as I moved around the kitchen, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "Hello, sweetheart," she replied, her voice carrying its usual warmth. "How are you holding up with the cold setting in? Is that old farmhouse keeping you warm enough?" We chatted about the weather, about the new wood stove I had installed, about the stew I was preparing for dinner. She told me about the book club she had joined, about the new neighbors across the street, about the haircut Dad had given himself during lockdown that was finally growing out properly. Normal conversation. Comfortable. The kind of mother-daughter talk that had always been a constant in my life. Then came the pivot, so subtle I almost missed it. "So, about Thanksgiving this year," Mom said, her tone shifting slightly. "Dad and I have been talking. I have already put in for time off." I jumped in enthusiastically. "I was thinking of bringing my cranberry orange bread. The neighbors have these amazing organic cranberries growing wild on their property, and they let me harvest some. Oh, and I found Grandma Josephine's old recipe card for her pumpkin pie. Remember how she always said the secret was—" "Kayla," she interrupted, something she rarely did. "That is what we wanted to talk to you about. We think maybe you should skip Thanksgiving this year." The wooden spoon I was using to stir my stew froze mid-motion. "Skip Thanksgiving? Why?" "Well, your father and I—" She paused, and I could picture her twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit she had had for as long as I could remember. "We just need some space this year. We are thinking of doing something smaller, more intimate." My chest tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "Smaller? You mean just immediate family?" "Well, yes," she confirmed. "Just us, Brian and his family, and Madison and Tyler." The words hit like a physical blow. Immediate family apparently did not include me. "I see." I managed my voice suddenly smaller. "Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong?" No, nothing like that," she rushed to assure me, though her voice lacked conviction. "We just thought with you so far away, and winter weather being unpredictable, it might be easier for you to skip this 1 year." It was a paper-thin excuse. The weather forecast was mild for November, and I had driven through far worse conditions last year without complaint. "Mom," I said carefully, "the drive is not a problem for me. I want to be there." A long pause followed, then her voice came again, more hesitant. "We just think it would be better this way, Kayla. Just for this year." "Are Brian and Madison okay with this?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Another pause. "They understand our decision." Which meant they had discussed this. All of them. Together. Without me. They had discussed excluding me from our most important family tradition, and they had all agreed. "I see," I said again. Because what else could I say? "You understand, don't you, sweetheart?" Mom pressed. "It is nothing personal. We just need a quiet year." Nothing personal. Being told not to come to a family gathering where everyone else was welcome. How could that possibly be anything but personal? I took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened. Have a lovely, quiet Thanksgiving, I replied, surprised by how calm my voice sounded when my insides were shattering. You too, honey, she said, relief evident in her tone. We will FaceTime you after dinner, okay? Sure, I agreed, though. We both knew that call would never happen. Give everyone my love. I will. Love you. Love you too. Bye, Mom. I ended the call and stood motionless in my kitchen, the stew now burning on the stove. I mechanically turned off the burner, then sank to the floor, my back against the cabinets, as the tears finally came. For an hour I sat there crying, until no more tears would come. The sunset and darkness filled the kitchen, matching the emptiness spreading inside me. Finally, I reached for my phone and called the one person who had always been there for me through James' death, through the move, through everything. Jessica, I said when she answered, my voice hoarse from crying. My family just uninvited me from Thanksgiving. Jessica, my best friend since college, gasped. They did what? Tell me everything. I recounted the conversation, each word still fresh and painful. That is messed up, Kay, she said, after listening to the whole story. Did they give you any real reason? Just that they need space, whatever that means. Space from what? From you being an amazing daughter who drives 4 hours to see them for every holiday, despite them never making the effort to visit you. Her indignation on my behalf felt good, a warming balm on the cold rejection. I guess I should have seen this coming, I reflected. Ever since I moved here, there has been this disconnect, like they see my choice as a rejection of them, of the life they wanted for me. So what are you going to do now? Jessica asked. I do not know. Sit here alone and feel sorry for myself, probably. No way, Jessica said firmly. You know what? If they do not want you at their Thanksgiving, create your own. That farmhouse of yours is gorgeous. You are an amazing cook and hostess. Who says you need them to have a meaningful holiday? Who would I invite? I asked. You are going to your parents, and I do not know that many people here yet. What about your extended family? Jessica suggested. Your aunts, uncles, cousins. Are they all going to your parents too? I paused, considering. I do not think so. Mom usually invites some of them, but not everyone every year. There are too many to fit comfortably. So invite them, Jessica said, excitement building in her voice. All of them. Everyone who is not going to your parents' house. Show them what they are missing by excluding you. That seems petty, I said, though the idea had already taken root. It is not petty, it is healing, Jessica insisted. Instead of sitting alone, feeling rejected, create something beautiful. Make new memories. Show yourself and everyone else that you do not need their approval to have a fulfilling life. By the time our call ended 2 hours later, a plan had formed. A plan that would either heal my broken heart or break it beyond repair. The next morning, I woke with a newfound determination. If my parents wanted a quiet, intimate Thanksgiving without me, I would create a loud, joyful one filled with people who actually wanted my presence. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen island with a notebook, and began to list every relative who might not have solid Thanksgiving plans. First on my list was Aunt Laura, my mother's older sister. They had always had a complicated relationship, competitive in the way only sisters can be. Mom rarely invited her for holidays, claiming Laura was too judgmental about her cooking. I had always found Laura to be straightforward but kind, with a wicked sense of humor that made family gatherings more entertaining. Next were Uncle David and Aunt Jennifer, my father's younger brother and his wife, along with their 3 teenagers. They lived in Maine and often spent Thanksgiving with Jennifer's family instead. Uncle David had always been my favorite uncle, encouraging my creative pursuits when my parents seemed concerned by them. There were also my cousins from both sides, some with partners and young children. In total, I had 15 potential guests, if everyone accepted, not counting any friends I might invite. I hesitated before making the first call. What if everyone declined? What if they had all heard from my parents and felt uncomfortable accepting my invitation? What if this whole plan backfired and left me even more isolated? Jessica's voice echoed in my head. You will never know unless you try. Taking a deep breath, I dialed Aunt Laura's number. Kayla, she exclaimed when she answered. What a lovely surprise. How are you, darling? I am great, Aunt Laura, I said, injecting confidence into my voice. I am calling because I am hosting Thanksgiving at my farmhouse in Vermont this year, and I would love if you and Uncle Robert could join me. A pause. Your parents are not doing their usual gathering. Here was the moment of truth. I could make up some excuse, but that felt wrong. They are, I admitted. But this year they suggested I stay in Vermont instead of driving down. So I thought, why not host my own celebration? The farmhouse is finally renovated and I have plenty of room for guests. It would mean so much to have you here. Another pause, longer this time. Then to my surprise, Laura laughed. Well, well, she said. Sandra always did play favorites with her children. I am sorry she is treating you this way, Kayla. And yes, Robert and I would love to come. We had no plans this year anyway. Your uncle is not a fan of big gatherings these days. Relief flooded through me. Really, that is wonderful. I can email you directions and details. We will be there, she confirmed. And Kayla, their loss is our gain. With that first success bolstering my confidence, I continued down my list. To my amazement, almost everyone accepted. Uncle David and Aunt Jennifer were enthusiastic. The kids have been wanting to see your farmhouse since you posted those renovation photos, Jennifer said. This is the perfect excuse for a road trip. 3 cousins and their families said yes. 2 had to decline due to prior commitments, but they sounded genuinely disappointed to miss it. By lunchtime, I had confirmations from 12 family members. I also invited Jessica, who immediately rearranged her plans to be there. No way am I missing this epic gathering, she declared. I reached out to a few neighbors as well, people I had become friendly with during my time in Vermont. The elderly couple down the road, the Wilsons, who had brought me homemade jam when I first moved in. The young family who ran the organic farm where I bought my produce. My handyman George, who had become something of a father figure during the renovation, teaching me how to fix things myself rather than always calling for help. With each acceptance, my excitement grew. This was no longer about proving something to my parents or healing my wounded pride. It was about creating a new tradition, one built on genuine connection rather than obligation. There were 2 calls I dreaded making, but knew I had to Brian and Madison. Brian answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. I could hear my niece and nephew arguing in the background. Hey Kay, he said. Can I call you back later? It is chaos here right now. This will only take a minute, I promised. I wanted to let you know I am hosting Thanksgiving at my farmhouse this year and would love if you, Amber, and the kids could come. The background noise suddenly diminished, as if he had moved to another room. Wait, what? But we are going to Mom and Dad's. You know that, right? I know, I said carefully. Mom called me yesterday and suggested I skip this year, so I decided to host my own gathering instead. A long silence followed. When Brian spoke again, his voice was lower, almost a whisper. She told you not to come. That is not how she explained it to us. She said you had decided to stay in Vermont this year because of work commitments. The revelation stung but did not surprise me. Of course, she would reframe the story to preserve her image. That is not what happened, I said simply. But it is okay. I am actually excited about hosting my own Thanksgiving. Several family members are coming and some friends too. There is plenty of room for you guys if you want to join. He sighed heavily. Kay, I cannot bail on Mom and Dad. You know how they are. They would see it as a betrayal. I understand, I said, and I did. Brian had always been the pleaser, the good son who never rocked the boat. The invitation stands if you change your mind. Madison's response was less apologetic. You are seriously trying to compete with Mom and Dad for Thanksgiving. That is so childish, Kayla. I am not competing, I explained patiently. I am making the best of the situation. They asked me not to come, so I am creating an alternative. Whatever, she scoffed. Tyler and I are definitely going to Connecticut. His parents are coming too. It is important for the families to get to know each other before the wedding. I understand, I said again, though her dismissive tone hurt more than Brian's reluctance. You are always welcome here if anything changes. With all the invitations sent, I turned my attention to preparations. My farmhouse, though spacious, would need some reorganizing to accommodate so many guests. The dining room could only fit 8 comfortably, so I would need to create an extended table arrangement into the living room. I spent a weekend scouring antique shops and secondhand stores for additional chairs mismatched in a deliberately charming way. I found beautiful vintage tablecloths, napkins, and candlesticks. I sketched a table layout that would allow everyone to see and talk to each other despite the unusual configuration. Next came menu planning. I wanted to honor traditional Thanksgiving dishes while adding some special touches that would make this gathering memorable. Turkey was non-negotiable, of course, but I decided on 2 smaller birds rather than one enormous one, allowing for more even cooking. I visited the local farmers market to source as many ingredients as possible from nearby farms. Fresh cranberries from a bog just 30 minutes away, potatoes, squash, and root vegetables from my neighbor's organic farm. Apples for pie from a historic orchard that had been operating since the 1800s. For 2 weeks, I threw myself into preparations. I deep cleaned every corner of the house. I created handwritten name cards for each guest. I arranged guest rooms, putting fresh flowers in each one. I made lists upon lists, checking and rechecking every detail. The frenetic activity kept the herd at bay. When thoughts of my parents' rejection threatened to overwhelm me, I channeled that energy into making another dish, arranging another corner of the house, planning another thoughtful detail. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I stood in my farmhouse and looked around with satisfaction. The place had never looked more beautiful. Autumn decorations adorned every surface, tasteful but abundant. The refrigerator and pantry were stocked with ingredients and prepared dishes. Every bedroom was ready for overnight guests. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel genuine excitement rather than determined distraction. This was going to be a Thanksgiving to remember, not because of who was missing, but because of who would be present. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone chimed with a text from Jessica, Operation Epic. "Thanksgiving is almost here. Your family has no idea what they are missing." I smiled as I texted back. "They will when they see the photos." Thanksgiving morning arrived with a gentle snowfall, just enough to dust the landscape with white without making travel difficult. I woke before dawn, excitement propelling me out of bed despite having stayed up late finishing last-minute preparations. The house was quiet and still filled with possibility. In a few hours it would be bustling with conversation and laughter, but for now, it was just me and the soft light of morning filtering through the windows. I padded to the kitchen in my slippers and robes, started the coffee maker, and began the day's cooking. The turkeys needed to go in first, followed by the stuffing, sweet potato casserole, and various side dishes, all timed to perfection. As I worked, I felt James' presence more strongly than I had in months. He would have loved this gathering, would have been in the middle of everything, charming every relative, making everyone feel welcome. For the first time, the memory brought more comfort than pain. "I am doing this for both of us," I whispered to the empty kitchen, and somehow I knew he heard me. At 10:30, just as I was basting the turkeys for the second time, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Looking out the window, I saw Uncle David's SUV pulling into the driveway. My heart swelled as I watched my cousins tumble out, pointing excitedly at the snow-covered farmhouse. I hurried to the front door, wiping my hands on my apron. "Welcome," I called, as they approached, their breath visible in the cold air. Aunt Jennifer reached me first, arms outstretched for a hug. "Kayla, this is absolutely magical, like something from a Christmas card." "It is even more beautiful than the photos," Uncle David agreed, giving me a bear hug. "You have done amazing things with this place, kiddo." My cousins, Jackson, Lily, and Mia, darted past with quick hugs, eager to explore. At 17, 15, and 13, they were at the age where family gatherings could be boring, but the novelty of the farmhouse seemed to have captured their interest. "Let me show you to your rooms," I offered, "and then you can help yourselves to coffee and breakfast pastries in the kitchen. Most other guests will arrive around noon." The next to arrive were the Wilsons, my elderly neighbors, bearing a homemade apple pie and a bottle of local maple syrup. "Would not miss it for the world," Mrs. Wilson said, patting my cheek affectionately. It is about time this old house had a proper family gathering. By noon, the farmhouse was filling up. Aunt Laura and Uncle Robert arrived with 2 bottles of wine and a cheese platter. 3 cousins and their families followed, creating a cheerful chaos of introductions and exclamations over the house. Jessica arrived with her new boyfriend Thomas, whom I was meeting for the first time. George, my handyman friend, came with his daughter and grandson. The family from the organic farm brought fresh dinner rolls and stories about their heritage turkey breeding program. Two more neighbors I had invited on a whim showed up with homemade cranberry sauce and pumpkin bread. By 1 o'clock, when we gathered around the extended dining table, we were 22 people ranging in age from 3 to 84. The table stretched from the dining room into the living room, covered in mismatched but beautiful linens, candles, and autumn foliage arrangements. The plates were a collection of vintage finds, no two exactly alike but harmonious together. I stood at the head of the table, momentarily overwhelmed by the scene before me. These people had all come because I invited them, because they wanted to spend this day with me. The realization was both humbling and empowering. "Before we eat," I said, raising my glass, "I want to thank each of you for being here today. Some of you have traveled long distances, some have changed plans, all of you have chosen to be part of this gathering. That means more to me than I can express." I paused, looking at the faces around the table. Thanksgiving is about gratitude, and today I am grateful for new beginnings, for the family we are born into and the family we create. Please join me in a toast to being exactly where we are meant to be, with exactly the people we are meant to be with. "Here, here," Uncle David called, raising his glass. Everyone followed suit, the chorus of cheers echoing through the rooms. The meal that followed was everything I had hoped for. The turkeys were perfectly cooked, moist, and flavorful. The side dishes, a combination of my creations and guests' contributions, offered a variety that satisfied every palate. The conversation flowed as freely as the wine, jumping from topic to topic, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of forks against plates. What struck me most was how quickly everyone bonded, despite many never having met before. Jessica and Aunt Laura discovered a shared passion for mystery novels. Uncle Robert and Thomas engaged in a friendly debate about football teams. The teenagers formed their own group at one end of the table, giggling over shared jokes. Even Mrs. Wilson, usually reserved, was animatedly describing her gardening techniques to my cousin Sam's wife. After the main meal, as people helped clear dishes and bring out desserts, I slipped away to the kitchen for a moment of quiet. The day was everything I had hoped for and more. The ache of my parents' rejection was still there, a dull throb beneath the joy, but it no longer dominated my emotional landscape. Jessica found me there, leaning against the counter with a glass of wine. "This is amazing, Kay," she said, bumping my shoulder with hers. "Everyone is having such a great time. I have never seen you look so happy, not even in New York." "I am happy," I realized, somewhat surprised. "This feels right, like this is what Thanksgiving should be. No tension, no walking on eggshells, just genuine connection." "Speaking of connection," Jessica said, pulling out her phone, "we need to document this for posterity. And for Instagram, obviously." We returned to the living room where dessert was being served buffet style. Jessica organized group photos capturing the extended table with all its occupants, smaller group shots, and candid moments of laughter and conversation. After dessert, the gathering naturally broke into smaller groups. Some went outside for a walk in the light snow, others played board games in the living room, and a few helped me package leftovers in the kitchen. Aunt Laura joined me as I washed serving dishes, picking up a towel to dry. "I have to say, Kayla, this is the best Thanksgiving I have had in years," she confided. "Your mother always did throw a perfect dinner, everything matching, everything on schedule. But this," she gestured around the busy kitchen, "this has heart." Her words warmed me. "Thank you, Aunt Laura. That means a lot. She continued, lowering her voice, "Your mother and I have had our differences over the years, but I never thought she would exclude her own daughter from a family gathering. It is not right." I shrugged, not wanting to invite criticism of my parents despite my hurt. People make choices. I am trying to focus on making my own positive ones in response. Laura smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Very mature of you. But just between us, I hope those Instagram photos make her absolutely green with envy." I laughed, surprised by her candor, but appreciating it nonetheless. "I guess we will find out soon enough." As the evening progressed, some guests who lived further away prepared to leave, while others settled in for overnight stays. Goodbyes were warm, with promises to keep in touch and do this again next year. "Next year?" I asked Uncle David as he embraced me in the doorway. "Absolutely," he confirmed. "The kids are already talking about it. You have started something special here, Kayla." By 10 o'clock, the house had quieted. Overnight guests had retired to their rooms, tired but content. I sat alone in the living room, a final glass of wine in hand, gazing at the remnants of the day all around me. The table still extended, but now cleared and wiped clean. The candles burned down to stubs, the empty wine bottles lined up for recycling, the subtle sense of turkey spices and desserts lingering in the air. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos Jessica had taken and shared with me. In each one, joy was evident on every face, including my own. I selected the best ones, created an Instagram post with the caption, "Grateful for new traditions and the family that chooses to be together. Vermont Thanksgiving, 2024. My heart is full." As I hit post, I knew what would happen next. My phone would likely ring tomorrow with my mother's voice on the other end, demanding explanations. But for tonight, I felt only peace and a quiet sense of triumph. I had turned rejection into connection. I had created something beautiful from something painful. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt truly at home. The morning after Thanksgiving dawned clear and bright, the snow from yesterday glistening in the sunlight. I woke to the comforting sounds of a house, filled with guests, muffled footsteps overhead, quiet conversations drifting up from the kitchen, the occasional burst of laughter. For a few blissful minutes, I lay in bed savoring the contentment that comes from having created something meaningful. Then I remembered my late-night social media post and reached for my phone, curious about the response. The notifications had piled up overnight. Dozens of likes, comments full of heart emojis, and exclamations about how beautiful everything looked. Friends from New York expressing surprise and delight at seeing Aunt Laura, whom they had met at James' funeral. Former colleagues asking for my Vermont farmhouse renovation services, but no messages or calls from my immediate family. I scrolled through the comments again, noting that neither Brian nor Madison had liked or responded to the post. My parents, who rarely use social media, would likely only see it if one of my siblings showed them. Part of me was relieved for this temporary reprieve. The other part knew that the silence was merely the calm before the storm. I joined my overnight guests for a leisurely breakfast of leftover pumpkin bread, fresh coffee, and fruit. Conversation flowed easily, as if we had been gathering this way for years rather than just one day. Plans were made for afternoon activities, shopping in the nearby town, visits to a local craft fair. Normal, comfortable post-Thanksgiving activities with none of the tension that often characterized my parents' home after holidays. It was nearly 11 when my phone finally rang, displaying Mom's name on the screen. I excused myself from the table and stepped into my study for privacy. "Good morning, Mom," I answered, keeping my tone neutral. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call might have dropped. Then came her voice, tight with barely controlled emotion. "Would you like to explain what I am looking at right now?" I took a deep breath. "I am guessing you saw my Instagram post." "Madison just showed it to me," she confirmed. "A full Thanksgiving dinner at your house, with Laura and David and everyone else we never see anymore." The accusation in her tone was unmistakable, as if I had stolen something that belonged to her. "Yes," I said simply. "When you suggested I skip coming to Connecticut this year, I decided to host my own celebration." "We did not suggest you skip Thanksgiving altogether," she snapped. "We just thought you might appreciate not having to make the drive." The rewriting of our conversation was so blatant, it almost made me laugh. "Mom, you specifically said you needed space and wanted a smaller gathering this year. Those were your exact words." "Well, yes, but—" she faltered, then switched tactics. "Do you have any idea how this makes us look? Everyone will think we excluded you." "You did exclude me," I pointed out, my calm beginning to fray. "That is not fair, Kayla. You know how much we have supported you, even with this impulsive move to Vermont that no one understood. And this is how you repay us, by embarrassing us in front of the entire family." The unfairness of her accusations stung. "I did not invite anyone to spite you, Mom. I invited people who had no Thanksgiving plans, people who wanted to be here. It was about creating something positive for myself, not hurting you." "Well, you managed to do both," she retorted. "Your father is beside himself. You know how much tradition means to him, how much he values family unity." "Family unity?" I repeated, incredulous. "You specifically uninvited me from the family gathering. How exactly does that promote unity?" I heard muffled voices on her end of the line, then Dad's voice came on the phone, gruff and authoritative. Kayla, what were you thinking? Inviting your mother's sister when you know perfectly well they have not spoken in months. And David, we had plans to visit them next month, and now everything is awkward. The revelation that my parents had been actively avoiding certain family members was new to me, but not entirely surprising. They had always been selective about which relatives were worthy of inclusion in their inner circle. Dad, I am sorry if this created tension for you, I said, meaning it. Despite everything hurting them, had never been my intention, but I did not know about any issues between Mom and Aunt Laura. No one tells me these things, and frankly, everyone got along beautifully here. Maybe the tension is not coming from them. Do not lecture me about family dynamics, young lady, he replied, his voice rising. We have held this family together for 35 years. We know what we are doing. Do you? I challenged, surprising myself with the directness. Because from where I am standing, it looks like you are pushing people away rather than bringing them together. Another muffled exchange, then Mom's voice again. The real issue here is your behavior, Kayla. It was childish and retaliatory. You were upset about our Thanksgiving plans, so you deliberately created a competing event to make us look bad. That is not what happened, I insisted. I was hurt, yes. But my response was to create something positive for myself, not to hurt you. There was room for everyone at my table, including you. The invitation was open. As if we could just abandon our own plans, she scoffed. Brian and Madison were here. Tyler's parents came. We had commitments. So did I replied quietly. To myself and to the people who accepted my invitation. People who wanted to be with me. The implication hung in the air between us, unspoken but understood, unlike my own parents. After another tense silence, Mom asked, Who are all those other people in the photos? I did not recognize half of them. Neighbors, friends, people who have become important to me here in Vermont. In just 2 years, that seems unlikely. The dismissal of my ability to form meaningful connections stung more than I cared to admit. You would know if you had ever visited, I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. You have never even seen my home, Mom. Not once in 2 years. The drive is too long, she said, automatically, apparently missing the irony that I made that same drive for every family gathering without complaint. I offered to pay for your flights multiple times, I reminded her, or to meet halfway. That is not the point, she deflected. The point is your behavior yesterday was disrespectful to this family. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted by the circular nature of the conversation. Mom, I created a lovely Thanksgiving for myself and others when you made it clear I was not welcome at yours. I did not badmouth you. I did not tell anyone you had uninvited me. I simply created an alternative. And posted it all over social media for everyone to see, Dad chimed in, apparently on speakerphone now. I posted a few photos of a beautiful day just like everyone does on Thanksgiving, I defended myself. There was nothing in my post about not being invited to your dinner. You did not have to say it explicitly, Mom argued. People can read between the lines. Margaret Johnson already called me this morning asking if everything is okay between us. So there it was. The real issue was not my happiness or well-being, but their image in the community, how they would be perceived by their friends and acquaintances. What did you tell her? I asked, genuinely curious about how she had explained the situation. That you had work commitments in Vermont, she admitted. A client emergency. The lie bothered me more than the original exclusion. So rather than admit you asked me not to come, you told people I chose work over family, making me look like the bad guy. It was easier than explaining the real situation, she said defensively. Which is what exactly, Mom? What is the real reason you did not want me there yesterday? It cannot just be about wanting a smaller gathering because everyone else was welcome. Another telling silence. Then, reluctantly, we had some new friends joining us. The Montgomerys. Harold works with your father. They are very traditional in their views. We thought you might be uncomfortable. You mean you thought I might make them uncomfortable, I translated? With my progressive views and unconventional lifestyle. You can be quite outspoken, Kayla, she said, as if it were an accusation. And after the way you challenged Harold's opinions at the summer barbecue. He was making racist comments about immigration. I reminded her. Was I supposed to sit silently and let that go unchallenged? It is not always your job to educate everyone, she sighed. Sometimes it is better to maintain harmony, even at the expense of doing what is right. Dad cut in. The point is, we wanted a peaceful dinner without political arguments. Is that so wrong? No, I conceded. But excluding your daughter to avoid potential discomfort with near strangers, that feels pretty wrong to me. Neither of them responded directly to that. Instead, Mom changed tactics again. Well, it is done now, but I hope you realize the position you have put us in. Christmas is going to be very awkward. Several people have already asked if you will be hosting again, saying how much they enjoyed your Thanksgiving. The fact that relatives had already expressed interest in future gatherings at my home should have made me happy. Instead, it made me sad that such a simple thing had become a source of competition and resentment. I have not made any Christmas plans yet, I said truthfully. But everyone is welcome here if they want to come. Including us, Mom asked, her tone softening slightly for the first time. The question caught me off guard. Despite everything, some small part of me still yearned for their approval, their presence. Of course, I said. You have always been welcome here, Mom. That has never changed. Another pause then, her voice smaller now. I will talk to your father about it. It was not much, but it was something. A tiny opening where before there had been only walls. I should go, I said, hearing my guests moving about outside the study. I have people here. Of course you do, Mom replied, the edge returning to her voice. Your new family. The comment was meant to hurt, and it did. But it also carried an unintended truth. In some ways, these people who had chosen to spend Thanksgiving with me, who had shown interest in my life and home, who had accepted me without conditions, were more family to me right now than my blood relatives. Goodbye, Mom, I said quietly. Give my love to Brian and Madison. I ended the call before she could respond, setting the phone down on my desk with shaking hands. The conversation had gone more or less as expected, yet still left me feeling drained and raw. I took a few moments to compose myself before rejoining my guests. Their laughter and warm conversation in the next room was the perfect antidote to the cold disconnect I had just experienced. As I stepped back into the living room, Jessica caught my eye, raising a questioning eyebrow. I gave her a small nod, letting her know I was okay. Whatever happened next with my parents, I had proven something important to myself. I could create joy and connection on my own terms. Their approval, while still desired, was no longer necessary for my happiness. That realization felt like the truest thing I had to be thankful for this year. The days following Thanksgiving passed in a pleasant blur. Most of my guests departed by Saturday with warm hugs and promises to keep in touch. Uncle David and Aunt Jennifer were the last to leave on Sunday morning, helping me restore the house to its usual order before their departure. This was special, Kayla, Aunt Jennifer said as she hugged me goodbye. We will remember it for a long time. Same time next year, Uncle David added with a wink. Let us hope next year brings everyone together, I replied. Though even as I said it, I wondered if such unity was possible given the current state of my relationship with my parents. By Sunday evening, the farmhouse felt strangely empty, the silence almost oppressive after days of constant activity and conversation. I wandered from room to room, straightening things that were already in order, feeling a mix of satisfaction at the successful gathering and unease about the unresolved tension with my family. My phone had remained quiet since the heated conversation with my parents. No calls from Brian or Madison, no follow-up from Mom or Dad. Their silence spoke volumes, reinforcing the distance that had been growing between us for years. As I made a simple dinner for myself from the remaining leftovers, I realized I was tired of this stalemate. Tired of the passive-aggressive communication, the misunderstandings, the hurt feelings on both sides. Something needed to change, and waiting for them to make the first move clearly was not working. On Monday morning, I made a decision. Instead of continuing this cold war through texts and phone calls, I would drive to Connecticut and speak to my parents face to face. No advanced warning, no opportunity for them to prepare excuses or avoid the conversation. Just an honest, overdue discussion about our relationship and where we went from here. I packed a small overnight bag, not knowing if I would be welcome to stay or forced to find a hotel. I left food and water for my cat, asked my neighbor to check on him if I was not back by Tuesday evening, and hit the road by 9. The drive from Vermont to Connecticut was familiar, yet strange. I had made this journey dozens of times over the past 2 years, usually with a mixture of anticipation and low-level anxiety. Today, the anxiety was amplified, tempered only by my determination to resolve things one way or another. The landscape changed gradually as I drove south, the rugged mountains giving way to rolling hills, then suburbs, and finally the familiar streets of my hometown. Autumn foliage, so vibrant in Vermont, was more subdued here. Many trees already bare their leaves, long since swept away. I arrived at my parents' house just before 2 in the afternoon. The modest colonial looked exactly as it always had, meticulously maintained, the lawn neatly trimmed, even in late November, Mom's dormant flower beds covered with protective mulch for winter. For a moment, I sat in my car, gathering courage. Then, taking a deep breath, I approached the front door and rang the bell. Footsteps approached from inside. Then the door swung open to reveal my father, his expression shifting from neutral to shocked in an instant. "Kayla," he said, as if not quite believing his eyes. "What are you doing here?" "I thought we should talk," I said simply. "May I come in?" He hesitated, then stepped back, opening the door wider. "Your mother is at her book club. She will be back around 4. "That is fine," I replied, stepping into the familiar entryway. "It gives us a chance to talk first." Dad led the way to the living room, his movements stiff, uncomfortable. He gestured for me to sit on the couch while he took his usual armchair, the physical distance between us mirroring the emotional one. "Would you like some coffee?" he offered, falling back on ingrained hospitality. "No, thank you. I am good." I settled on the couch, noticing how little the room had changed over the years. Same furniture, same photos on the mantel, same faded oriental rug covering the hardwood floors. An awkward silence stretched between us. Dad cleared his throat. "So, you drove all the way here to talk?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Because I am tired of this situation, Dad. The distance, the misunderstandings, the hurt feelings, it is not good for any of us." He nodded slowly, his expression guarded. "Your mother was very upset by that social media post." "I know," I acknowledged. "But I was very upset by being uninvited from Thanksgiving. Can you understand that?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We were not trying to hurt you, Kayla. We just thought." He trailed off, seeming to realize how weak any explanation would sound. "You just thought it would be easier without me there," I finished for him. "Because of these new friends with their traditional views. The Montgomerys, right?" Dad looked surprised that I knew the name. "Your mother told you about them?" "She mentioned them, yes. Apparently, I am too outspoken for their comfort." "It is not that simple," Dad protested. "Harold is an important client for the firm. We are trying to secure a major contract with his company. Your mother and I thought it would be better to keep things uncomplicated. So I was excluded for business reasons." The revelation hurt in a new way. I was a potential liability to a contract. Dad had the grace to look ashamed. "When you put it that way, it sounds terrible." "Because it is terrible, Dad. I am your daughter, not a business risk to be managed." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his expression had softened. "You are right. It was wrong what we did. I knew it as soon as your mother hung up the phone with you. But by then it felt too late to fix things." The admission surprised me. "It is never too late to fix things," I said. "That is why I am here." "And we appreciate that," came my mother's voice from the doorway. I turned to see her standing there, coat still on handbag, clutched tightly in one hand. Her book club must have ended early, or perhaps she had left when Dad texted her about my unexpected arrival. "Mom," I said, standing, "I thought we should talk face to face." "Yes," she agreed, her voice tight. "That seems wise." She removed her coat and joined us, sitting next to Dad in the matching armchair, creating a united front. "I was just explaining to Dad why I am upset," I said, returning to my seat on the couch. Being excluded from Thanksgiving hurt me deeply. It felt like a rejection, not just of my presence, but of who I am. Mom's expression was complicated, a mixture of defensiveness and guilt. "We never meant to make you feel rejected, Kayla. We just thought, given everything, it might be better this year." Given what exactly I pressed, my personality, my beliefs, the fact that I moved away, all of it, she admitted after a pause. You have always been different from the rest of us. More outspoken, more independent. That is not a bad thing, she hastened to add. But it does make certain situations more challenging, like impressing Dad's clients. She exchanged a look with my father. Yes, like that, but also family gatherings in general. You have to admit, Kayla, you often end up in heated discussions with someone. Because I care about things, I defended myself. Because I believe in standing up for what is right. We know, Dad said, and that is admirable. But sometimes, just sometimes, it would be nice to have a peaceful family dinner without debates about politics or social justice. I wanted to argue to point out that silence in the face of harmful views was complicity, but I realized that would only prove their point. Instead, I tried a different approach. I understand wanting peace, I conceded. But excluding me entirely seems like an extreme solution. You could have just asked me to avoid certain topics for one dinner. They exchanged another look, and I suddenly understood something I had missed before. Unless it wasn't just about what I might say. It was about who I am, wasn't it? A single woman who left a successful career to start over in a rural area. Someone who does not fit neatly into traditional expectations. Mom's hesitation confirmed my suspicion. The Montgomerys are very traditional, she finally said. They believe in certain family structures, certain life choices. And my choices do not align with their worldview, I concluded. So rather than risk them judging your parenting based on your unconventional daughter, you decided not to include me at all. It sounds terrible when you put it like that, Mom echoed Dad's earlier sentiment. Because it is terrible, Mom. You chose the comfort of near strangers over the feelings of your own child. The blunt statement hung in the air between us. Then, to my surprise, Mom's eyes filled with tears. You are right, she admitted, her voice breaking. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I made the call, but I convinced myself it was for the best. She wiped at her eyes with a tissue from her pocket. And then Thanksgiving itself was so stiff. Everyone on their best behavior, no one saying anything real or meaningful. The Montgomerys dominated the conversation with stories about their country club and their son at Princeton. It was the worst Thanksgiving we have had in years, Dad admitted. Even Brian and Madison said so afterward. And then we saw your photos, Mom continued. Everyone looking so happy, so relaxed. Laura laughing, actually laughing. David's kids playing games with your neighbors. It looked like what Thanksgiving should be, and it made our gathering seem like what it was, a performance. Her honesty took me by surprise. I had expected more defensiveness, more justification, not this raw admission of regret. We messed up, Kayla, Dad said simply. We hurt you, and we ended up having a miserable holiday ourselves. Nobody won. I did not win either, Dad, I said softly. Yes, my gathering was lovely, and yes, I made new connections and strengthened old ones. But there was still a hole where you, Mom, Brian, and Madison should have been. My new family doesn't replace my first one, it just expands it. Mom nodded, dabbing at her eyes again. We realized that too late. When Madison showed us those photos, my first reaction was jealousy and anger. But after I calmed down, what I really felt was regret. Regret that we weren't there, that we missed out on something special. The whole situation made us realize how much we have been prioritizing appearances over substance, Dad added. Not just with Thanksgiving, but with so many things. We have been so concerned with how things look to others that we have forgotten what really matters. Which is what I asked, needing to hear them say it. Family, Mom said without hesitation. Real connection. Being true to ourselves and each other, even when it is messy or uncomfortable. Her words were exactly what I needed to hear, what I had been longing for them to understand. For the first time in our conversation, I felt a glimmer of hope that real change might be possible. So where do we go from here? I asked, keeping my tone gentle. Dad leaned forward in his chair. We start over. We admit our mistakes and try to do better, and we hope you can forgive us even though we do not deserve it. I can forgive you, I said, feeling the truth of it as I spoke. But I need things to actually change. I cannot keep feeling like the family outsider, like I am tolerated rather than embraced. That is fair, Mom acknowledged. What would help you feel more included? The question was so direct so unlike our usual pattern of hints and implications that it momentarily caught me off guard. I had to think about what I actually wanted from them beyond the general desire for acceptance. "I would like you to visit my farmhouse," I said finally, "to see the life I have built there, to understand why I love it, and I would like us to be honest with each other even when it is difficult. No more hiding behind excuses or social niceties." They nodded in unison. "We can do that," Dad promised. "In fact, I would very much like to see this famous farmhouse that has everyone talking." When I pressed not wanting the commitment to remain theoretical, they exchanged glances again, but this time it felt less conspiratorial and more collaborative. "How about Christmas?" Mom suggested. "Instead of you coming here, we could all come to Vermont." The offer was so unexpected, so beyond what I had hoped for, that I felt tears welling in my eyes. "Really, all of you?" "If you will have us," Dad said. "Brian, Amber, and the kids too. And Madison and Tyler if they are willing." "Of course I will have you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "There is nothing I would like more." Mom rose from her chair and moved to sit beside me on the couch, taking my hand in hers. "I am so sorry, Kayla, for Thanksgiving and for all the times we have made you feel less valued because you chose a different path." Her touch, her words broke something open inside me. Tears I had been holding back spilled over, and suddenly I was sobbing, releasing all the hurt and longing I had carried for so long. Without hesitation, Mom pulled me into her arms, holding me as she had when I was a child. Dad joined us, his hand resting on my back, a solid, reassuring presence. "We love you, Kayla," he said, his own voice unsteady. "All of you, exactly as you are." It was what I had needed to hear for so long, what I had almost given up hoping for. In that moment, something shifted between us. A wall crumbling, a bridge beginning to form. We still had much to discuss, many patterns to unlearn, many hurts to heal. But for the first time in years, it felt like we were truly seeing each other, truly willing to do the work of rebuilding our relationship. And that perhaps was the greatest gift this painful Thanksgiving could have given us. 1 month later, my farmhouse in Vermont was transformed once again, this time for Christmas. Garlands of fresh pine adorned the banisters. Tiny white lights twinkled in every window, and a magnificent spruce tree stood in the corner of the living room, decorated with a mix of vintage ornaments I had collected from local antique shops, and handmade decorations crafted by my niece and nephew. The sense of cinnamon, pine, and vanilla filled the air as I put the finishing touches on the dining table, arranging name cards for the 16 people who would gather there later that day. My family was due to arrive within the hour, all of them together for the first time in my Vermont home. So much had changed in the month since my impromptu visit to Connecticut. Weekly phone calls with my parents had evolved from cautious and formal to genuine and warm. They asked questions about my life in Vermont and actually listened to the answers. I inquired about their activities without the defensive edge that had characterized our interactions for so long. Brian called me directly for the first time in months, apologizing for his part in the Thanksgiving situation. "I should have stood up for you," he admitted. But I took the path of least resistance as usual. Even Madison reached out, sending a text that simply read, "I miss you. Can we talk?" Our subsequent conversation revealed a sister I had almost forgotten existed beneath the competitive facade, one who looked up to me more than I had realized. The sound of tires on gravel alerted me to the first arrivals. Looking out the window, I saw my parents' car pulling into the driveway, followed closely by Brian's minivan. They had coordinated to drive up together, stopping overnight at a hotel halfway to break up the long journey. Taking a deep breath, I went to the front door to greet them. Mom was the first up the porch steps, her arms outstretched, her face alight with a genuine smile. "Kayla," she exclaimed, embracing me tightly. "This place is absolutely magical." Dad followed, looking around with appreciation at the farmhouse exterior. "You were not exaggerating about the renovation work," he said, clearly impressed. "The place looks completely transformed from those early photos you showed us." Brian, Amber, and the twins tumbled out of their vehicle, the children immediately racing toward the light dusting of snow on the front lawn. "Can we build a snowman?" Aunt Kayla Noah called out. "There might not be quite enough snow yet," I laughed, "but we can certainly try later." Amber hugged me warmly. "Thank you for hosting," she said sincerely. "The kids have been counting down the days. They cannot stop talking about seeing Aunt Kayla's farm." Madison and Tyler arrived 30 minutes later, having driven separately from New York. My sister's hug was tentative at first, then fiercely tight. "I am sorry for being such a brat," she whispered. "Your home is beautiful." By evening, with everyone settled into their rooms and the initial excitement calmed, we gathered in the living room for drinks before dinner. The atmosphere was relaxed, but charged with a new energy, a sense of beginning again. "Before we eat," Dad said, standing with his glass raised, "I want to say something." He looked around the room at each of us, his expression unusually vulnerable. Our family has always prided itself on traditions, on doing things a certain way. But sometimes traditions can become rigid, exclusionary, more about appearances than connection. Mom stood to join him, taking his hand. "What happened at Thanksgiving was a wake-up call for us," she continued. "We realized we had been prioritizing the wrong things, valuing conformity over authenticity, comfort over growth." "We are sorry," Dad said, looking directly at me. "Not just to Kayla, though, especially to her, but to all of you, for the times we have made you feel you had to be a certain way to be fully accepted in this family." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within me. This was not the father I had grown up with, the man who valued propriety and appearances above all. This was someone new, or perhaps someone who had been there all along beneath the social conditioning and generational patterns. "What matters is not where we celebrate or how perfectly we maintain appearances," Mom added. "What matters is that we are together, that we see and accept each other exactly as we are." Brian stood next, surprising me with his willingness to speak publicly. "I want to apologize too," he said, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I have always taken the easy path, avoiding conflict, going along with whatever seemed least disruptive. But sometimes conflict is necessary for growth. Sometimes speaking up is the most loving thing you can do." Madison joined the circle, pulling Tyler with her. "And I need to say sorry for being so judgmental," she admitted. "I have been so focused on creating the perfect life, the perfect relationship, the perfect image, that I forgot what really matters." Seeing the photos from Kayla's Thanksgiving, how genuinely happy everyone looked, made me realize what I have been missing. I had not expected this outpouring, this family reckoning. Tears pricked my eyes as I stood to join them. "Thank you," I said simply, "for being here, for being willing to change and grow. When Mom called to suggest you all come here for Christmas, I hardly dared believe it was real. Having you all here in this place that represents so much healing for me means more than I can express." We raised our glasses in a toast to family, to new beginnings, to the messy, imperfect, beautiful reality of loving each other through change and across differences. Dinner that night was joyful chaos, with conversations overlapping, laughter erupting from multiple points around the table, and none of the tension that had characterized our gatherings for so long. The twins told elaborate stories about school. Madison and Tyler shared details about their wedding plans, asking for my input on design elements. And Brian revealed he was considering a career change, something he had never dared mention in previous family settings. Most surprisingly, Mom and Dad seemed transformed, more relaxed and authentic than I had seen them in years. Dad told stories from his childhood that I had never heard before, revealing vulnerabilities and missteps that the carefully curated family narrative had always omitted. Mom admitted she had always wanted to paint, but had set it aside for more practical pursuits, a revelation that led to us planning a future art retreat together at the farmhouse. As the evening progressed, it became clear that what had happened at Thanksgiving, painful as it was, had been necessary. It had broken open the shell of pretense we had been living within, forcing us to confront the gap between the family we pretended to be and the family we actually were. Later that night, after most had gone to bed, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Mom making cocoa for those still awake. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if we had not excluded you from Thanksgiving," she mused, stirring milk in a saucepan. "We would have had our usual gathering, pleasant on the surface, but with all that tension underneath, nothing would have changed." "Sometimes things need to break before they can heal properly," I offered. She nodded thoughtfully, "Like a bone that has been set wrong." "Exactly. It hurts more to re-break it, but it is necessary for true healing." Mom reached for my hand across the kitchen island. "I am sorry it had to be that way, that we had to hurt you to finally see what we were doing. But I am grateful for where we have ended up." "Me too," I said, squeezing her hand. "And you know what I realized through all this? That creating my own Thanksgiving when you asked me not to come was not about spite or competition. It was about finally understanding that I could create belonging for myself and others, that I did not need to wait for permission or approval to build the life and community I wanted. That is a powerful lesson Mom acknowledged. One, I wish I had learned much earlier in life. I spent so many years trying to fit into others' expectations, trying to be the perfect wife, perfect mother, perfect community member. It is exhausting and ultimately hollow. It is never too late to change, I reminded her. Look at us now. She smiled a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Look at us indeed. Over the following days of the Christmas gathering, I watched my family relax into this new way of being together. The carefully maintained facades began to fall away, revealing the authentic, imperfect, wonderful people beneath. Dad and Brian spent an afternoon helping me repair fencing in the back field, Dad revealing a surprising knowledge of carpentry that he had never shared before. My father taught me, he explained, before he decided I should focus on more successful pursuits. Mom and Madison joined a cooking class in town, returning with stories of spectacular failures and newfound skills, laughing together in a way I had not witnessed in years. The twins explored every inch of the property, coming back with treasures found in the old barn, creating elaborate stories about the history of the farmhouse that we all pretended to believe. By the time they all departed, promises had been made for future visits, for regular video calls, for a summer reunion at the farmhouse. Plans that felt solid, sincere, not the vague "we should do this sometime" that had characterized our parting words for so long. Standing on the porch, waving as the last car disappeared down the driveway, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from rejection to reconnection had been painful but necessary. It had forced all of us to confront the patterns that were keeping us from true intimacy, from authentic connection. In the months that followed, these changes proved to be lasting, not just a temporary holiday miracle. My parents visited again in March, just the two of them spending a week exploring Vermont and really seeing my life there. I made regular trips to Connecticut, but now on my terms, as an equal adult rather than a child seeking approval. Brian and his family came for a long weekend in April, the twins helping me plant my first vegetable garden. Madison called weekly, our conversations gradually shifting from surface details to meaningful exchange. The farmhouse continued to be a gathering place, not just for my immediate family, but for the extended family and friends who had made Thanksgiving so special. Uncle David and Aunt Jennifer brought their kids for spring break. Aunt Laura and Uncle Robert became regular visitors. My neighbors stopped by for coffee, and conversation becoming an integral part of my chosen family. What I learned through this experience was profound. Sometimes rejection can be a doorway to something better if we have the courage to walk through it. When my parents told me to skip Thanksgiving, it felt like the ultimate exclusion. In reality, it was the beginning of true inclusion, of authentic connection based on who we really are rather than who we pretend to be. I discovered that family is not defined by blood alone, but by choice, by the willingness to see and accept each other, to grow and change together. I learned that creating my own traditions does not diminish the value of old ones, but enriches the tapestry of connection that makes life meaningful. Most importantly, I realized that my worth is not determined by others' acceptance of me. That lonely evening after my parents uninvited me from Thanksgiving, I could have collapsed into hurt and resentment. Instead, I chose to create something positive, to open my home and heart to those who wanted to be there. That choice made all the difference, not just for that one holiday, but for the rebuilding of relationships I had almost given up on. As I sit on my porch, now watching the summer sunset paint the Vermont mountains in gold and purple, I am filled with gratitude for the painful gift of last Thanksgiving, the rejection that led to reconnection, the breaking that enabled healing, the end that became a beginning. If you are facing exclusion or rejection from those who should love you most, remember this: you have the power to create your own belonging, your own traditions, your own family of choice. The path may be painful, but it can lead to something more authentic and beautiful than you ever imagined. I would love to hear in the comments how you have turned rejection into opportunity in your own life. Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the door closing in your face is just making way for a better one to open. Thank you for being part of my journey, And remember, the family that truly matters is the one that loves you exactly as you are.